Well, have you heard the one about Bigfoot being sighted on Mars? Or that we never really went to the moon? How about the conspiracy theory that jet contrails are actually chemicals being sprayed to control the weather? Well, if you want to learn the truth about these odd myths, then a local author has just the book for you. Our good friend Astro Bob King's new book is Urban Legends from Space, and it puts those myths in their place. Welcome, Bob. Great to have you. Where in the world did you come up with an idea like this?
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And the idea came from teaching, really. I do a lot of community ed astronomy teaching in Duluth here for many, many years. And I've heard some interesting questions, and whenever I ask people if they've seen a UFO, I inevitably get a third of the hands go up in the class. And so I like to educate about science, and so I have some very interesting questions.
Well, let's get into some of those urban legends because they're interesting, fascinating. That persistent conspiracy theory that the moon landing was a hoax, for instance.
Yes.
Where did that get started, and what keeps the story alive?
A very small group of people.
It's a very big social media platform.
Yes, I know. I think the story was dying off, and then social media just added gas to the small group, and so it's kind of become more heard of these years recently. Maybe it got started with that Capricorn 1 movement. I don't know, where they had a moon landing that was faked in a studio, and the idea caught on. I couldn't tell you the exact origin, but it is a minority of Americans and other people across the world who simply don't believe it for various reasons. One of which is they think it's technically impossible.
Well, give us the best evidence to debunk it.
Well, there's several excellent bits of evidence. Matter of fact, there is an enormous amount of rocks, something like 862 pounds, I believe it is, of moon rocks that were brought back, that anybody can, if they're a scientist, they can apply and receive a piece to do an experiment. And they've been experimenting with these rocks for decades. Another one, a very easy one to see for anyone to go online, is we have a spacecraft going around the moon called the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, and it can get very close to the surface, and it has photographed every single one of the Apollo landing sites in rather great detail, considering how high it is. You can see the astronauts' footpaths, you can see where they parked the lunar rover, the descent stage that's still there on the surface, and some of the scientific instruments. Also, some of those—
But how do we know that that's real?
Some things do come down to trust. I mean, there are many things we don't know.
She was a philosophy major in college.
Say, we have some photos that we can look at, and you can kind of share some fun
I'd be
stories.
happy to.
Bigfoot.
Yes, well, this is a whole other topic.
You mean there's no Bigfoot on Mars?
Well, as you can see, there's the Bigfoot on Earth there, and
on the right.
Interestingly enough, on the left you can see him on Mars. Sometimes NASA provides all these photos. We can look at them anytime. And some people go online and look for things in those photographs and make claims that what they see is the real thing. And what's happening there is something called pareidolia, which is our ability to see patterns and shapes in things and interpret them as real when they're not necessarily real, like looking at a cloud.
And that Bigfoot was a rock, wasn't it?
It was a rock, Dennis. It was about 2.5 inches tall.
That's it.
But when you zoomed in on it tight, it looked like Bigfoot was on the loose.
Here's a flying saucer over Lake Superior.
Yes, this is wonderful. This was submitted by someone who just lives up the shore, and he photographed 5 Mile Island outside of Grand Marais. And what we see there is a mirage. The air temperature over the water is such compared to the higher temperature of the air to make the island look as if it's floating in the air. It looks like a flying saucer, but of course we know it's a mirage.
You mean there are no flying saucers?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. At least for me, I've spent many, many hours under the night sky, and I've yet to see a flying saucer.
I'm with you.
What are we seeing right now?
This is an interesting proof that the Earth is not flat. Have you heard about that?
Oh, yes.
And I heard just the other day, a student who attended the University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities told me that there is a Flat Earth Society there, and there are 100 members in the group. Anyway, that is a ship, and you saw that the bottom of the ship was missing, and that's because you couldn't see the bottom until the ship got closer, because it was hidden by the curvature of the Earth.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Wow. What's this all about?
This is nothing It looks like the sun is rising.
It does.
And that was, of course, taken right here down on Lake Superior. But what it really is an optical illusion. When the sun is only half up on the horizon, the Earth's atmosphere along that direction is so dense that it acts like a prism and lifts the sun up when it actually has not risen.
So we see it before it actually rises.
See it before it rises. If you could get rid of the atmosphere, Dennis, the sun would disappear in this photograph. Oh, this is a wonderful
Yeah,
UFO.
what is this?
Can you imagine? Wouldn't you think that would be a UFO? This is a rocket that was launched by the Russians that went out of control, and it's spewing fuel, and that fuel is catching the morning sun and is spinning, creating that spiral. And a lot of people saw this over Norway several years ago. Oh, this is something else. This is our two planets compared, Uranus and Neptune.
So not much of a story there.
No, not on this.
We hear often people say, "Oh, it must be a full moon." That behaviors are different. That
Yes.
people kind of go crazy when based on the moon phases. Any truth to that?
Actually, big surveys have been done, major surveys, as to whether there's increase in crime or if just, there are more babies born. And it turns out that no, that it's a very random thing and that there are no increases. I think what happens is that we tend to pass along. We're looking for an easy reason when something happens. Where I used to work, it was the same thing. If there was a crime, people would say, must be a full moon. But I know no one ever checked the calendar to see what the phase of the moon was. And of course, me knowing the lunar phase, I would say, no, I think it's a waxing crescent here.
It's
But
so
we
hard.
pass it along. We
It's so
pass it
hard to
along.
debunk these myths, though.
Yes, it is. And it is because, for some people, it's a matter of they believe in them and you cannot change their mind. But for some people, they're kind of sitting on the fence. And then you can present the evidence and they will say, oh, I see what you mean now. I just never knew that. And one thing I tell people is to use the evidence of their senses as much as possible. Stick around, observe whatever the phenomenon is. Don't run in your car and drive away if you think you see a UFO. Stick around and pay attention. And nature will show you a reasonable explanation, I should say.
Now, is this a science book or is it a book of fun facts?
It's a book of fun science. I'm sorry to be evasive, but no, it's a book of fun science. There are some 50 chapters about different types of phenomena, including UFOs and, as Dennis mentioned, the contrails, chemtrails controversy. And I think it's entertaining and just interesting. And you'll learn some science. You'll learn to trust your senses a little bit more.
Yeah.
And you'll have some ability. You'll be able to go to some places to get proof for these things, too. on
Astro
your own.
Bob King, we have to stop.
We do.
Out of time again. We'll have you back.
Thank you.
All right, Bob. Thank you.